I want to respond to a point that's been made by A.V. Lesner, who says that I'm severely wrong. There are limited exceptions from the duty to inform on any knowledge of a crime. Are you talking about possible murder here? And you were talking about possible murder here. We are. Journalists have some exceptions, priests as well, depending on their church's relation with the country in question, and MPs have certain protections. Often, other than that, if you become aware of a crime and not report it, that's when you start coming close to or are over the line to be an accessory to the crime, especially if the information is demanded by a judge and in confidence, not to be made public. Whistleblowing is very important, and so is the protection of whistleblowers. And that is reflected in the judge's assurance of confidence. I'm not a lawyer, so the above reflects my layman's understanding of the matter. It would be kind if you could consider this perspective of looking at things. Well, I do. And in fact, I've made about 13 videos on Johnny Mercer, and perhaps I'm remiss in not repeating all the points I've made in the past. But let me, I was going to say let me be clear, but I don't wish to be Liz Truss. But I would like to clarify the real issue in the Johnny Mercer and the demand that the judge has made is about Johnny Mercer's character. And under normal circumstances, I think when a sitting MP gives assurances that something is true, that should be enough for any judge. And that's what Johnny Mercer did. And that's within the scope of the whistleblowing context. And I agree entirely with you that whistleblowers should be absolutely protected. And indeed, I've written on a number of occasions about the concerns I've got over whistleblowing, particularly in the NHS, where whistleblowers are themselves pilloried and practically drummed out of the country for their efforts. So there is legislation to protect whistleblowers, but in practice it's not as efficacious as it should be, and maybe the new government can tighten the law in that respect. In the case of Johnny Mercer, he revealed to everybody the quality of man he is with his spat with Fred Thomas during the general election campaign, and he lost his seat to Fred Thomas deservedly. And maybe the judge saw something in Johnny Mercer that we did not see until the general election. That is that you can't necessarily believe what he says. And that's where we start to get into sticky water. I entirely agree, therefore, that the judge should question Johnny Mercer's testimony and should question the sources of Johnny Mercer's testimony. However, I think the judge goes too far in demanding the names of these sources and the full details of these sources, because that goes that contravenes the protections of whistleblowers, number one, and number two, it flies in the face of the undertakings that Johnny Mercer may or may not have given to these people. And I think we have to work on the principle at that point that Johnny Mercer is trustworthy. So there are two issues working against each other, and the idea of Johnny Mercer being a martyr for the truth might have worked had we not been privy to, had we not seen the way he treats his political adversary. And Johnny Mercer was at the time the Veterans Minister, and he was lampooning a veteran. It doesn't come off well. So it's that balancing act. I think the judge is wrong, with the greatest of respect, to demand more, but I think the judge is quite right to question Johnny Mercer's credibility. And it's that balancing act. So threatening Johnny Mercer with jail seems perfectly in order, but demanding that he gives up his sources is not acceptable. And so this is really about the credibility of Johnny Mercer, not about the whistleblowing itself, and not about the information. I think it's about the credibility of Johnny Mercer, and that is where the contempt of court lies. And I think either it's been distorted in the telling, or there's blinkers in various places. But frankly, my sense is that the judge has been significantly more perspicacious than the majority of the public, and certainly the journalists who reported initially on this affair. But thanks for flagging it up. And I will try and be a little bit more comprehensive in future. But as I say, I've made 13 odd videos about Johnny Mercer, and this was in the last video that I made was within that context. And I'm sorry if I hadn't been clear enough.